What is going on, you guys? It is that time again for another collecting card chat. I forgot what it's called this time, Mike.
Squared Circle Collecting Chat. We still haven't worked on shortening the title.
I feel like these segments get better, but for some reason I can't even name what we call this thing.
Yeah.
But this episode we have a special guest, Mr. Rob England, and if you know, like David Peck in the Twitter world, you definitely know this guy. He's all over the place, and his collection is insane. So we will get into that right now, and we'll go ahead and bring him in and just jump right into it. What is going on, Mr. England? How are you?
Good morning, you guys. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Say we just dive right into it. If you could just give us just kind of a brief introduction on yourself and your footprint in the wrestling card hobby.
Yeah, so as far as wrestling cards, I know exactly when I got into it because it's when I joined eBay. And, I collected, trading cards. I remember buying, 1983 baseball packs from my local market. And so I was big into collecting. And then I think once the early 90s started hitting and it got overwhelming, I was a person that liked to have everything. I kind of shut it down because it just got too overwhelming for me and not being able to have it all. So it was best just to step out of the ring.
Right.
But then I was a grad student in college and I signed up for eBay, and that was January of 1999. And so my wrestling card venture has been 2 decades strong. And that's pretty much a daily occurrence on eBay since then.
So when you first got into collecting, like what were these 82 Wrestling All-Star Hogans and Andre the Giants that are skyrocketing as we speak? Seems like the price is going up by the second. What were those going for back then?
So I don't even remember as far as purchasing those in 1999. It might have been a few years into my eBay world is when I bought some of those All-Star sets. But I do remember buying that 1982A for just over $50 for a complete set sealed. And I know, right? And then I remember many times, there was a handful of times after that I got outbid right around $60, whereas the second highest bidder. And yeah, just thinking back on that now, as far as, opportunities lost, and the 1983 A's were pretty prevalent, and they would be sitting out there just hanging out at $5 a set.
Oh my God.
And you could get as many of them as you wanted. So you could have all your Mr. Perfect rookies for $5 a set sealed. And that happened, for those, that was many years that those stayed at those prices.
Right. In April of 2020, I bought my first Series A set, and I paid around $2,800. And I mean, they're really crispy. They're really nice and mint. And I remember telling Mike, like, oh my gosh, I am absolutely insane to pay this much for this thing. And now I look back at it now, not even a year later, and I'm like, man, that's a great deal.
It's a bargain these days. And when they actually went up in value, a lot of them were hanging out at that 750 to 1,000 range. And that was just up until a couple years ago. So, things have definitely changed as far as, in our COVID world and the last, it's not even a full year yet.
No, it's not.
Things have just exploded.
So Rob, would you say that so you were collecting your earliest memories, 83 Topps baseball or baseball, and going forward, when you joined eBay in 99, did you refocus and just go, I'm just doing wrestling? And like, what was the reason? Like, do you still collect other stuff, or are you mainly focused on wrestling only?
So you're going to learn a little bit about my personality, is that like, I kind of want the best, right? And I'm limited as when it comes to baseball, basketball, all that. I mean, there's just such heavy hitters out there in the hobby where, I can't even compete. And so what actually got me back into wrestling is I come from an amateur wrestling background. I coach youth wrestling. I coach high school wrestling. And when I would go to these amateur tournaments, I would see a lot of my quote heroes, guys like Dan Gable. I was back in 1995. I went to Atlanta and I watched Kurt Angle, win his world title. And I got his autograph there and got to talk to him a little bit. So I really like those crossover stars between amateur and pro.
Right.
And so I kind of worked backwards. So I went back and collected a lot of the wrestlers from the 19th century. So all those Allen and Ginters, I have those in PSA 7 or better, all 7 cards. I actually have a J.H. McMahon and PSA 8. And so I was starting to work my way up. But then what would be kind of a challenge for me is, at first I was thinking this is just going to be an amateur wrestling collection. And then realized how many amateurs and pros had crossover in the vintage years. Right. And so I was like, I can't, spend all this time figuring this out. So I'm just going to collect the full, 1954 Parker set. I'm going to collect the full 55 Parker set. Nice. And of course, like even with the Wrestling All-Stars, when I went back to the NCAA championships, right standing in front of me at the memorabilia show would be guys like Jack Briscoe and Lou Thez and Vern Gagne. And I don't even think I realized, who I was in the presence of at that time, but smart enough to, get their autograph and move along. And back then, it wasn't as easy to take pictures. I mean, I was a guy just enjoying a good time weekend, watching some good wrestling. And I really wish I had pictures with those guys, but
not realizing the presence you were in is definitely something that's understated there, because not a lot of people today can actually make that claim that met these guys after a show or wherever it was. A lot of these guys that are long gone, the stories of people meeting them are very, very few.
Yeah, definitely. And one of my prized cards is having a 1954 Parkhurst signed by Vern Gagne. So you think no one, really knew about wrestling cards for a long time, and to actually take that card and to have him sign it, that's something that's really, really special. It's nothing like, baseball and the amount of baseball cards and the autograph hunters and all that. I have rare item when it comes to wrestling.
I've never seen a single 55 Parkhurst sign.
Yeah, I
got Don Leo Jonathan. I got George Scott. I had a Killer Kowalski, which I regret. I sold it just because it was so beat up. But man,
please tell me you have something signed by Iron Mike Sharp.
I did probably about 3 times on his All-Stars, and I've let them all go. And now I need to. I'm trying to track it back down.
Self-proclaimed Canada's greatest athlete. Always. That was the big thing. Give himself a pat on the back. Love it.
Well, I'm going to find it. So
Rob, I've been following you on your Instagram and Twitter for a long time. And I definitely think you are one of the leaders in the Twitter wrestling community. You're very active on there, and I think that's awesome. But I noticed you, like you alluded to earlier, have a lot of really high-end graded cards. So I'm assuming you might be part of the PSA registry. And if you are, you want to talk about some of the sets maybe that you have on there?
Yeah, so I'm Wrestling Card King. And the way I came up with that name is my last name's England. And hey, let's be the king of England in some kind of world, right? Nice. So some people don't realize the connection there, but that's something that I thought was a good little play on words. Nice. And I would say, like, my best registries and some of the things that I'm known for is just discovering sets and getting sets graded for the first time. Right. So it was about 5-6 years ago where I created the 1981 Kajiwara Wrestling that has the XRC of Hulk Hogan in it. Mm-hmm. It's also known as the 1981 Poppy set. Right. And that one was a challenge. And what I was doing is when I first discovered those, I'm a figure collector's worst nightmare because I bought some of those figures and I was popping them out, and you get like 7 cards in every figure. So it's not just the header card.
Wow.
So I probably bought about 8 of those figures and popped them out. And that I was like looking for the Hogan. And I realized Hogan's not here. So, something's amiss. And so it's really, really unusual as far as with the Hogan, because he's the only figure that doesn't have the header card of himself on it probably half the time.
No kidding.
So it's a extremely short print card. I would say, as far as what's known in the hobby, is 15 or less.
Wow.
And I have 4 of those. I have 2 PSA 8s that are the highest on the registry. And when you figure that it's on top of the pack and then it could hit the hard plastic,
right,
they're always going to be condition sensitive. So an 8 might be the best you'll ever get.
You were talking about you pride yourself on finding sets, and I don't think I've been able to tell you this, but thank you for tweeting about the 1997 Superstars right here. So the first time that you tweeted that out and you posted, and I don't know, it must have been like 12 to 18 of the Rock, the one that you really want in here. I seen that image on that card or that sticker, and I was like, man, that is so cool. And at the time the Bumblebee was starting to tick up, the 97 Cardinal was starting to tick up, and I was like, man, let me jump in on some of this. And so the first couple boxes I bought were $100 a piece, and it was all I could do to justify that. And then so I got those 2 in from where was it, like Cairo, Egypt, I think they came.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you tweeted something else, and I'm like, man, like, you have a big footprint on the Twitter community if you see it or not. And I'm like, man, Rob's tweeting this stuff out, like more people are going to jump on this set. So I went and bought like 4 more, like immediately. And by then they were like $150 a box. And then after that, like, forget about it now. Like, it's out of my price range now. So I have 4 of them sealed. And actually, my wife and I are actually going to open this one today. I'm going to end up opening 2 of them and keep 2 sealed. But thank you, man. You definitely put a couple dollar bills in my pocket.
And to be honest, I don't think we've seen the best of this yet. And why I say that is card prices are going to be depressed until some graded copies start entering the market. And just for full disclosure, I bought a couple cases of the stuff really early on, and I've ripped through pretty much a case of this stuff. I sent some of my best stuff to PSA. I paid, I don't even know, what is it, Super Express. So it was $75 a card, and I hit a PSA 10.
Oh, wow.
So I actually hit 2 PSA 10s.
Holy moly.
Once, in conjunction with this Young Rock series, things I really love about this Panini, and I'm going to just compare it for the Cardinal.
Yeah.
So what I really like about the Panini is the name brand. We know Panini versus, with all the other great, all the other sports out there. It has the copyright date on the back, and it has a card number. Right. So those are all extremely, good qualities. It's not necessarily a sticker that you peel. It's just thin stock that's meant where you put adhesive and put it into a book.
Right.
So I think that's even better. And, the Cardinal, I would say the thing that it has going for it over the Panini is that it says Rocky Maivia on it.
Right.
The name on the front of the card. But I think once you put that Panini in a slab, you're going to have that name on the front, with the grade. You're going to have manufacturer, the year, a card number. I'm bullish on it big time. So I think it could compete with the Cardinal.
Right.
I think right now it seems maybe that the Panini wasn't as good just because there was this onrush of supply that came out. But this was a warehouse find in Cairo, Egypt from Panini. And what was estimated, and this is what they told me, is that there was 30 to 35 cases. So you're looking at 750 to 820 boxes.
Oh, wow.
So the thing is with that is you're not going to be finding these in the US because it's a European issue. You know, in Cardinal, you're going to probably find those at secondhand stores, and it makes a lot of good stories, you know, and I love them both, you know, don't get me wrong. But once this supply deplenishes, it might be out. And then it's going to be with collectors who got in early.
Right.
So
I think as you see them now, they're already drying up as far as what's out on eBay.
Definitely.
And that's going to be good for the prices. And I might just let one of those 10s go just to bring up the value of the boxes and have the rest go for it.
Sometimes you have to do that. You have to put it out in the market to generate the uptick in the price.
And for example, that's one of the reasons why I think the Poppy Hogan, people really don't even know exactly how to price that or what kind of monster of a card that it is because there just hasn't been enough of them circulating.
Sure.
So it lacks awareness and it lacks, you know, that motivation for people to pony up big money for it.
Makes sense.
So I've opened 2 of these, Rob, and in one box, I pulled 1 rock. No, I pulled 1. And when I say 1, I mean the one that you're really looking for, not all the other ones. I pulled 1, and in the other box, I pulled 2. So out of the case plus that you've opened, like what was the most that you pulled out of any one box?
I don't think you're going to get really any more than 2 in a box, but I think you're going to get some really great value. That Stone Cold, that's not even the main Stone Cold, I think that sold for over $100 just recently as a single. You're not going to get that 113 rock for under $100. So right there, that's paying for your box. And you get all those secondary, you know, Rocky Maivia cards. And the thing is with these is I got an album as well because I knew that I needed the album to have PSA grade them. So I took pictures of the whole album front and back. And when I super expressed these Rocky Maivias to PSA, at first I got the email that said no spec info and they were going to ship the cards back to me. And so I was on a mad rush with all my contacts at PSA, like put a stop on these, put a stop on these. But in the album, it talks about Rock being only 23 years old. And so, you know, they're referring to him as far as, you know, 1996. And I think with the Cardinal is that it was released in 1997 and 1998, like both years. So you could have an argument that the Panini was, you know, the first one solely in 1997.
Right.
Insane.
So, question I was going to throw at you too, Rob, was, I mean, we know about the Hogans, the Flairs, the Andre, the Rock. Who do you think are the next ones to take off? Do you see Undertaker, Ultimate Warrior, Macho Man, Cena? Like, I know, like, is anyone going to reach up to where, you know, the Hogans and the Rocks are? Is that A, is that possible? And B, who do you see heading that way?
One is I think Hogan and Rock are in their own special category.
Right.
So, you know, maybe the guys that you mentioned now will achieve that status and price-wise, but I still think as far as future value that Hogan and Rock have a lot more room to run.
Right.
And so, you know, they might go to the stratosphere. Meanwhile, the floor of these other guys are going to, you know, improve as well. Sure. You know, one of the things that I just got in on, and I know that maybe for a lot of longtime collectors, they see the increase in prices and, you know, they're just staying out. But I still think there's plenty of opportunity to get in on this. You know, for example, this summer, I was just looking at the 1991 Classic that has the Undertaker rookies in it.
Yeah.
And someone listed a case of them. And you know, I wouldn't have went about it by selling a case at one time.
Oh my!
I was like, all right, like I'll give you, you know, $1,200,
Right.
and I got a whole case. So that's 24 sets. So if you figure that's 96 Undertaker rookies that are packed fresh.
Right.
And I think really, if you want a high grade Undertaker, going raw is going to be a huge challenge. Not to say that's not possible, but with those blue border cards,
Right.
Yeah.
you're really, it's a huge gamble to know that someone's properly, you know, taken care of those cards.
Yeah, they're definitely.
So I think you need to buy sealed, and you still see some sealed listed at some decent prices. I still think there's value, just as I think some of the greatest value right now in wrestling cards is just going for and buying those boxes, buying that complete Panini box, buying that sealed 1991 classic box.
Yeah.
You know, when you see some of the prices on the Ultimate Warriors, Savages, Hogans, you know, as long as you get it slabbed, you're going to do all right.
You know,
well, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to touch on the Cardinal. So, just a quick story. So I've got the Rocky Maivia and PSA 6, and the story on that one is you talk about value and where cards are going. I started watching this card that was up on auction. I think I picked it up in September or October of last year. And the one thing that I found was the auction was ending like in the wee hours of the morning. So I put in, you know, a snipe of like $225 just as a let's see what happens. And I ended up winning it for about $203. And I mean, we're only talking 4 or 5 months ago. And now the value of that card has gone up so much that, you know, we had a discussion, Garrett and I'm thinking, you know, do I sit and wait? Do I move it because I got it so cheap? But I think it's something you touched on is there's so much value still to go that I'm kind of leaning on maybe I just sit and hold for a little bit.
You know, Mike, you and I talked on here before Rob joined us.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I didn't think about when we were talking about, hang on, buddy, if you should sell or not, is when Rob talked about it earlier, is that I don't know the exact name of it, but that Young Rock series that's coming out on TV. I think that's going to bring a lot of eyes to Rocky Maivia or The Rock or Dwayne Johnson.
Right.
There's going to be a lot of eyes, man. So I kind of digress from what I told you earlier. And I'd almost say just hold on to it just for a smidge longer, just to see what happens.
And when you talk about The Rock too, Rob, do you have any of the Bumblebee cards, his football?
So yeah, this is what happened with me on the Bumblebee is I had it in the past and I had it in an 8 and I was like, you know what? I don't want this at 8 and I got rid of it. And so I didn't have one for a long time. And so this past May, I was putting in some offers on the ones that were listed on eBay. And I got a counter offer, and I mean handful of offers. Right. And so I put in some I got the counter offer, and it was about $720 for the 10. And I did a little bit of research. So I went to the PSA site and saw the auction prices realized and saw when they went in a real auction, they were going for, you know, mid 5s. And I was like, oh, do I want to pay, you know, an extra $200 for this card? And I was like, and I talked myself out of it. And then all of a sudden, you know, they're gone. And then some got listed for 1,000. And so and I was all thinking about it. And here I missed the opportunity at 700.
Wow.
And looking at them at 1,000 and stayed off the sidelines. And then it just exploded, right?
Yeah.
So it had, you know, a few months ago where the $14,000 sale and then the $46,000 sale. But once I missed that opportunity to get my 10 is I went and bought a really nice sheet out of Miami, Florida. Oh. So I perforated that thing myself. Talk about a nerve-wracking experience because I knew, you know, everything that was on the line.
Oh, man.
And to me, it looks super clean, but I've been grading cards a long time, but with perforated cards, it's just a whole different animal as far as, what is this actually going to get? And
Right.
I don't know if they're a little bit tougher on the grading now, once it starts becoming an iconic card.
Right.
But, I got an 8 on that. And so, I got that 8 basically for, I think I had eBay bucks and stuff like that for about $400 for my 8. But I think in the future I might just crack it and submit it again because it looks super clean to me.
Is there anybody else on that sheet that maybe went to the NFL or?
Oh yeah, there's some Ray Lewis rookies and
wow.
Yeah,
so
right.
I'm hoping Ray and Warren could pay for my sheet and I get a rock for free.
Good call.
We've talked about Hogan and The Rock quite a bit on this chat, and I can't help but to think like those guys are already up in the upper atmosphere as far as prices. But I can't help to think like, why are guys like The Undertaker, Ric Flair, maybe even Shawn Michaels to a lesser extent, mega names, like the story of wrestling or WWE, WWF cannot be told without these three gentlemen, but their market hasn't seemed to budge. Just kind of want to get your thoughts on that, or I mean, maybe you don't even have any, but I just think it's very interesting.
I think someone with Shawn Michaels it's really tough for his first card, as far as, the rockers or, there's a little bit of murkiness as far as what's the card to get. I would say the market scene would be a really good one as the rockers. It's really tough, condition sensitive. That one should be the card. Ric Flair, there has been, a market. I don't even know what a PSA 10 would bring. I think the problem with Flair with, some of his cards and not maybe being in the Hulk Hogan status is, he has several, well, I guess, Hogan has it too, but, Flair has all those WCW cards, like in the Impel, all those, cards in the Wonderama. And so there's just so many of them out there. But I think as, the more collectors you get in here, all that stuff is going up.
Yeah, I think the one that baffles me the most, honestly, is Undertaker. I definitely think he would be on the Mount Rushmore of WWE, WWF, and he's just dirt cheap. His classics, his classic and Merlin, like those still can be had really cheap. Not cheap, about $100 to $150. But still, I think that's dirt cheap compared to where all these other guys are, these major names.
And this is what I, say too, and I've been guilty of it as far as you can't look backwards. So I think when some of the people look at the 1991 Classic and be like, oh, these sealed sets are going for, let's say 250 or 275. Oh, that's too much. I'm just sitting there doing the math going, you're going to get, one key Undertaker rookie. You're going to get the other 3. So you're going to get 4 pristine, hopefully pristine cards or close to it from a sealed box. And looking at the prices of all these other cards, I'm taking that gamble.
Yeah.
And I'm going to buy that box. I'm going to grade those cards. This is what I say too, is you could probably sell those other 3 Undertakers and have the main portrait shot for free if you're wanting to go do the work for it.
Right. Or even the Hogan, like the Hogan out of the classic set. What happens if you get a 10 on that? That's going to.
And you don't even need 10s because everything's moving. Everything's slabs moving. So, 8, you're probably still going to make money. 9, you're going to, pocket some money.
Right.
And then 10, you're going to hit a home run. And, yeah.
But what are some sets you're hot on, Rob, that maybe some of your all-time favorite sets?
All-time favorite sets, of course, the iconic one is the Wrestling All-Stars. And so one of my pet projects has been for quite some time is to get the 1982 A signed in the highest grade possible. So I have a lot of those in 8s and 9s signed. So if you think as far as trading cards, back then it was taboo, to get a rookie card signed.
Oh,
but that's changed in the last 10 years. And anyone new that comes out, they have their rookie card signed. So it's kind of like the company didn't do it, so I'm going to go do it and then get them slabbed up. And it brings a really unique item, and I think like that Hogan PSA DNA 9 that really changed the market, within the last year of going for 20,000 and for 36,000.
No doubt.
And would just a straight 9 have brought that? At the time, I don't think so. No. But I think the fact that it was signed.
I think another set I've been seeing on the rise over the past couple months is the 87 tops or 87 O-Pee-Chee with the Bret Hart rookie in it. That thing's definitely, I think, starting to gain some traction, which I think is interesting.
I think O-Pee-Chee in general is, as far as all of wrestling is limited in comparison to other sports product.
Right.
And I think with wrestling, it was just fighting a stigma for so long. So when I was on the PSA boards and I would post about wrestling, I would get crickets or, just demeaning comments. And then David Peck joined, and what I would give him, a lot of credit for is he was persistent. But I would say the mob was after him. Like, oh, you collect guys in tights or shorts, and that's dumb. And and he just kept going back. And I think when I posted and got no reaction, I kind of just stepped out and these guys aren't into it. So wrestling had a stigma for so long. But now that stigma's off, when I didn't win a card on eBay, I could go to David Peck or Joey Graben and be like, oh, you got me. But now there's just so many other guys in the market that, it's brought everything into play. And now when you have all of these collectors, they look at something like O-Pee-Chee and they see that it's much more limited than tops. That's a reason for that stuff to be worth a lot more.
And Rob, you're going to get Mike all excited talking about O-Pee-Chee.
Yeah, being up in Canada, it's funny when Garrett and I first discovered we had this infinite love for wrestling, and we were talking one night, and he said something like, I remember watching wrestling as a kid, and I'm like, yeah, so did I. And we found out that we both, and then we went into it full bore. We were like, you know what? So what if it's men in tights? We don't care. We started collecting. We started this chat. That started gaining traction. We both have got into the collecting. I'm trying to build a 55 Parker set. And I've got that probably only about a third complete, but like you said, everything's going up. So it's tougher and tougher to get the set in the cards in a decent grade. Like a lot of them are beat up. But when you talk about O-Pee-Chee, I mean, being from Canada, it's only an hour down the road, the old O-Pee-Chee plant. And you're right. Some of that stuff is very limited and very, very sought after.
I love the 1985 equivalent, the O-Pee-Chee. Yeah. And I think that's often overlooked, the one before the Randy Savage, but to get the Hogan and all those other cards.
Yeah. Definitely. When we first talked about it, I said to Garrett, I'm pretty sure I have an O-Pee-Chee, 85 O-Pee-Chee set in my back room amongst my boxes. And he's like, you might want to dig that out. I think it's pretty sought after. And I was like, really? I got the 80s. I got a couple of 87s too. And, I remember showing them off one night on a StreamYard with him. And he's like, holy smokes, you got to get them graded. So what I did was I took the 85 series 1 and 2. I think I pulled 18 Hogans out of there that were really.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And the two Randy Savage, one by himself and one with Miss Elizabeth, and they're off at PSA. And I'm like, I've had discussions with David Peck too, and he's like, have your Hogans come back yet? And I'm like, no, I'm still waiting. They should be back though in the next month or two, so I'm pretty excited to see them.
Gosh, I have some PSA orders that I think I sent out in July or August, and
Yeah,
one day they'll come back.
yeah, exactly.
I guess last question here, Rob, and then after this question, maybe you can give us a little show and tell of maybe some cool things you have in your collection. But who are some of your all-time favorite baby faces or heels?
The one that I've stuck to all this time and where I have some of the highest grade is Andre the Giant. And at one time I was putting together an Andre the Giant registry, and then he was being released in a lot of recent sets, right? And so then I was like, that's not as exciting. So I just kind of capped it, and I went into the 90s, but then now I even took that back a little bit and went like 1985 and before. So I have things like his 1972 Gong. I have his 1973 annual in a PSA 10. His first pack issued cards were Yamakatsu out of Japan. And there's one, the profile, the famous shot with his arms raised and his, the brown coat.
The leather vest or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And I got that in a PSA 9, which is the highest graded. And then the Body Slam one, I have that in a PSA 9. I hit a PSA 10 of his 1978 Amada, which is a great little card.
Holy smokes.
I self-subbed the 1978, like the big annuals. I got a PSA 10 on one of those oversized Andres with my own submission.
Wow.
And so going back and getting, there's like a dozen Andre cards before his All-Stars. So again, I'm, dipping into the obscure and trying to unearth things, get things graded, getting the best graded. His 1981 magazine card is really hard because a lot of times it goes into the border. And I got that one in a PSA 9. That might be really hard to match.
Right.
Nice.
Yeah. So
those annual cards, is that released in Japan?
The annuals, no, that's a U.S. magazine release where you're supposed to just, cut them out.
Okay.
Hand cut them, and they're like paper stock. And I know that a lot of collectors at first they're just like, these are, these aren't cards, but like on the cover it says photos, collect them all. They have a biography back. And when they're raw, I have to admit, it's not real exciting to have. But once, to hold it, because you need a card saver to really even hold the thing. But once you slab it, the stock means nothing.
Right.
So,
recently,
Andre from that 1973 annual went for $5,000. So people are after it. It's an early collectible of Andre. And I think about some of those 9s that I used to have. I sold all those after I got my 10 and kind of lived the regret a little bit, but cash flow going and
good stuff. Good stuff. Rob, before we wrap this up, I just wanted to touch on one thing, and maybe you could speak to it. Totally off topic, but I noticed that you do some work. You're a board member on something to do with mental health. So I think that's send kudos your way for doing that. Maybe you could kind of just talk a little bit about that. Maybe touch on what exactly you do.
Yeah, so my day job, outside of my wrestling card king persona, is I'm a health promotion and education manager at a health clinic here. And I oversee suicide prevention, opioid prevention, tobacco, teenage sexual health, all kind of health-related topics. And so I would really say that my niche has been in suicide prevention for almost like the last decade.
Right.
I facilitate trainings in my community. I attend, national conferences, and it's just something I'm really passionate about. And I don't know if, people really realize this, but 48,000 people per year in the United States die by suicide each year. And that's just where we know intent. So to me, it's a public health issue where we need to bring awareness. You know, it's a worldwide issue. And, you know, I am encouraged as far as with some of the progress that is being made, because it's been neglected for too long. And, you know, some of that is that there was a bill passed as far as the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline number. You know, that's 1-800-273-TALK or 8255.
Right.
And, you know, who's going to know that number, you know, when they need it? Right. But once it's properly staffed and funded, we're going to have a 988 number, which is going to, you know, for mental health emergencies.
Nice.
Which is extremely positive for 3 digits. And some of the other platforms that we have as far as 741-741, which is a crisis text line, which is great for people who don't want to talk to a person. But, you know, just in thinking back for wrestling and all of the wrestlers who've died by suicide, it's definitely been an impact, you know, in the wrestling community, and just seeing some of the histories. But, you know, there's definitely room for improvement in that area. And that's something that I'm pretty much going to have a lifelong commitment in these efforts.
Well, you should be commended for it. It's appreciated.
I've been active duty military, Rob, for 19 years now, still going. And that's definitely a topic that is, I guess, near and dear to my heart. Through the past 19 years, I've lost a lot of shipmates due to suicide and all that. And I think the general public doesn't quite realize how many vets and active duty servicemen and women commit suicide every year. I think if people knew more about it, they would be astonished at the number that actually happens. So yeah, just like Mike said, I commend you for doing it and stepping up to the plate on something that probably isn't talked about as much as it should be.
Yeah.
Absolutely, you know, not, you know, and, you know, everyone, you know, wants to, you know, rally and support our troops. But I think for the way to support our troops is to support them, especially, you know, when they come back home and there's that, you know, difference in their lives, and just to be sure that they get, you know, all the care that they need throughout their lifetime for their service to our country.
Right. You're absolutely right. Do you have anything around you that you could show us, like some cool items?
Okay, let me see. There's my one. That's a 10.
Put you.
Wow.
Holy smokes. Look at that.
Yeah.
And that's that. It's like a newspaper.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
I just bought one of those, Rob, like 2 weeks ago of Ernie Ladd.
Oh, yeah.
And I got it in and I was like, what in the heck is this? And because it's like, Mike, it's just like a newspaper, man.
Or like something out of a magazine page.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So again, I've probably cut up around 15 or 16 of those magazines.
Right.
In my quest to have the best. And I have that whole set in the highest grade. So I think I have 28 or 29 in PSA 10.
Wow.
And there's one of the sheets of 9 quote cards, right, is off center. So those are the ones that have been the challenge to keep me. At first, I was just going to go for a 1973 set, all PSA 10, but with the offset sheet, it's just not possible.
What's the name of that magazine?
1973 Annual.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
Let me see. I don't have some of my cards handy, but
he's got some of the magazines, I bet.
I've never even seen one. And the reason I jumped on the Ernie Ladd is because I'm like, man, this is very unique. I've never seen this before.
So this is what I talked about earlier.
Okay.
Oh my God.
There's the Vern Gagne. That's
so
fantastic. Cool. That is absolutely fantastic.
So with the 1954 Parkhurst, there's Lucky Premium backs and there's Bio backs.
Yes.
And it's a 1954 set, and I have, I think, 130 out of the 137 in the top grade.
Wow.
that exist, period. So
Good. So I guess the goal is to get the other 7.
the goal is to get the other 7.
Nice.
I text one guy that has the other 2, and he's being a hard ass, and I don't like
it. Good stuff.
Rob, it's been a pleasure, man. We're 45 minutes into it. Mike and I can probably speak for Mike. We'd love to have you back in the next couple months to see
absolutely
where this crazy train of wrestling collectibles is going, and see, even from right now, what has changed. But thank you for coming on our show. Greatly appreciated, and it's just amazing collection you have.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. And if I have just some final words, hold on to your Rocky Maivia. That rock show, young rock show, it's gonna blow rock up further.
Okay, I'll hang on
to it.
You know what I'll do? Here's what we'll do: is I'll hang on to it, Rob, and then hopefully after the Young Rock show comes out, sometime after that, we'll get you back on, and we'll see where it's at that point. It'll be interesting to look back from this time.
Yeah, put your value here on Valentine's Day, and when I come back, we'll see where it's at.
You got it. You got it. Deal.
Thanks, Rob. We appreciate it, brother.
All right. Thank you.
Oh, man, Mike.
That was something. I can't believe some of the things, I mean, we're always, to quote Eric, those back pages, I mean, in the wrestling world, we're always learning.
Yeah.
And I mean, Rob brings another facet to the game. I mean, we talk about, this, that, and the other, but I mean, he starts bringing some of these, talking about the extended rookie card of Hulk Hogan, and he's talking about the annual of out of a magazine. And I'm like, holy, like, I thought wrestling was it's just this. It's
right.
just this. And then Rob just kind of took it and said, no, there's so much more.
I'll tell you, if you're into wrestling cards and you're not following Rob on Twitter, and I'll try to put his Twitter down in the description box below, but you're kind of doing yourself an injustice. I've learned a lot from him. He's not necessarily the guy that's always going to show you, oh, I got this 10 and that 10 and this 10 and that 10. Like I said, he's the guy that got me on these 97 superstar stickers.
Right.
When he showed those, they were all raw.
Right. Right.
And so I'm definitely learning stuff from him. I'd say on a weekly basis, on different things that he posts. So it's really cool. So we've had Mr. Peck on.
Yeah.
Mr. England on.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you caught it, but Rob said someone named Joey Gabbins.
Yep.
So I have no clue who that is, but that's the mission, to find out who that gentleman is.
We'll have to hunt him down and get him on here. I mean, if we're gonna continue this series, we have to have the best of the best. And we've had Rob and Dave on. If Rob's talking about Joey, because David spoke about Rob.
Yeah, he
and
did.
If Rob's speaking about Joey, we got to bring him on too. We got to get them all on here.
Down that rabbit hole, man.
Yeah, no doubt.
So I definitely think before we sign off here, I think Rob's right about holding on to that rock card. And what is so freaking hilarious, y'all aren't privy to this because it was before I pushed record, but we were talking about this before we started. And I think at the time, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I think we were like, let's sell it. By I mean you. We were like, we're selling it.
Well, I mean, I looked at it like this. I mean, at what point, like, as always, I mean, sometimes you have to let things go. And, I kind of think back, and I mean, the story about how I let my Ovechkin go.
Yeah.
That has like tripled from like.
Tell that story real fast if you can. Just make it a quick one. So
people real quick. I bought 10 Blake Jameson, Nolan Ryan cards, and I paid 200 Canadian for 10 of them. I sold 6 of them for a total of 1,800 when that Project 2020 was blowing up. I took that 1,800. I bought an Ovechkin PSA 10. I then took the Ovechkin PSA 10 2 months later.
Young Guns, we're talking.
Yeah, Young Guns. And sold it for $3,250. It is now, I mean, they're asking in the $10,000 stratosphere. And I'm like, you know, and I watch, and we talked about this. I watched Dave Blue Jacket 66 video is, you know, I did really well on that whole deal. So I can't have that FOMO feeling. I did really, really well.
Right.
You know, I turned 120 Canadian into 3250. That's fantastic. Now we fast forward and I'm like, okay, I paid about 260 Canadian for this back in the day. Can I get 10 times the value? And that's what we were talking. I was thinking, well, maybe it's time. Maybe it's time. But now after listening to Rob, maybe I'll wait. Maybe I'll wait and just, you know, generate a bit more income and get something else for the collection. So
right. And I'm kind of intrigued by all those rocks he sent from the 97 Panini Superstars when he gets those back. I'm sure he'll be tweeting those out.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the buzz that will come about because he's going to be tweeting out these kick-ass cards. And in my opinion, probably him and Mr. Peck are, you know, 1A, 1B, and every day back and forth. What people watch and follow and learn in the wrestling community. Yeah. And people are going to go to buy this stuff and it's just not there.
Right.
These
exactly.
prices are gone. There's a couple on eBay, but they're asking just crazy prices.
Sure.
So that'll be very interesting. So, brother,
that was
go
fun.
ahead and wrap this one up.
You bet.
I love it, man. Like I always enjoy when you and I get on here and shoot the gab. But it's always like this one, or what really is kind of like that I really am salivate over. You know, just a lot of learning happened for me.
Yeah, and always seems to rejuvenate. You know what I mean? You get pumped up by seeing some of these guys' collections. You're like, wow, like I can't believe it.
Right.
So a lot of fun.
Yeah, brother. So thank you. Till next time, y'all. Adios. Be safe. Bye-bye. Toodles.